All right, then I think let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining us from today, all parts of the world. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Gaëtan Garcia, I'm Head of Operations for TAFISA, and I will be your moderator for this webinar. Today, our webinar is about From Frameworks to Action, Financing Inclusive and Community-Driven Sport for All Initiatives. And for those of you who were present there in our last webinar in December, this is a little bit the sequel of our webinar on fundraising readiness, whereby we were looking in fundraising readiness on how organizations can prepare, can build themselves up to be better for fundraising. And now we are looking more on the outward side of things, on how fundraising and financing can be actually having an impact on community and how we can facilitate all of these mechanisms of getting from frameworks to action on having really impact. So for today, I'm very pleased that we have among us very high-level experts who will be able to share different perspectives from also different aspects of the whole ecosystem. And without further ado, I would like to welcome for Impulse of today, Philippe Führer, who is the co-founder and Chief Impact Officer from bloomUp. Philippe, please take it away.
Goodbye. So too.
Thank you, Gaëtan. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you very much, TAFISA, for the invitation. There we go. Gaëtan, we all good? Yes. So thanks for the invitation, and a particular thank you to Jean-François and Wolfgang, with whom I had the pleasure to work over the past few years. It's great to be reconnected with you guys and contribute to today's discussions. I will have a short introduction so you understand a little bit my journey in sports for development or sports for the better world, and I will touch on the framework and focus a little bit on health, as your heading said, from framework to action. So I will then move into covering some recent tools that have been tested into innovative finance or impact investments to leverage sports for a better world. I will share some personal experience going on right now and finish with a few takeaways to open up for discussions. My journey into sports for development or sports for better communities really started a long time ago, as I was a student in the 90s, mixing studies in geography and sports. And I first discovered the development of sports in Africa, to then move into understanding the power of sport for better individuals and a contribution to society at large. And I learned a lot as an athlete, as a coach, and as a PA teacher as well. But then most importantly, through my 16 years with the International Olympic Committee, meeting a lot of organizations, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different models along the way, and being myself involved in various charities and organizations. I'm focusing mostly right now in a territory which is in between physical activity, sports for all, with sustainability, health and well-being and prevention in public health, and also active design, urban planning. As I said, I'm a geographer, so I'm always interested into the relationship between territories and human beings and societies. I very much focus on this sort of bio-psychosocial aspects of well-being, looking at the physical health, mental health, and social well-being of everyone, with a particular interest into intergenerational bonding, intersectoral approach by mixing sports with culture, education, arts, nutrition, because the challenges we're facing in society are really so complex that we need to really join forces with all types of different profiles and sciences and experts. I also bring in most of my work a very strong focus on youth empowerment. I'm happy to be the father of the IOC Young Leader Project that I started in 2015, 2016, and I find it amazing to discover the power of young talents and how empowering young social entrepreneurs through sport can really make a difference in organizations, in cities, in regions. And more recently, and this is a big part of the discussions today, I've also explored sustainable finance, impact investment, but I have to say a bit of warning, I'm not a financial expert, but I certainly looked into this area and worked closely with an expert Patrick Elmer, who's based in Zurich and founded iGravity, consulting firm in impact investment. We published together in 2020 a white paper on innovative finance and sports for development. I will mention that in a moment. And the focus we had when we published this in 2020 was to try and go beyond philanthropy, because most of the sports for development activities or NGOs or players really depend almost solely, if not completely, on philanthropy, donation, and it is time to go beyond and find new models. So after this quick introduction, a quick word on the framework, and we all know and try to follow the common roadmap we have for 2030 with the Sustainable Development Goals. But if you look recently at the most recent reports on the progress we've made, it's pretty scary and glooming in terms of the number of SDGs where we are pretty late or really not making enough progress. And of course, we took a lot of setback with COVID recently and geopolitical challenges we have around the world, obviously. So when you listen to the Secretary General of the UN in some of the most recent reports last year and in 23 as well, it's pretty scary to hear him saying that unless we act now, the 2030 agenda will become an epitaph for a world that might have been. So the question now is, how can we accelerate on that journey to 2030, and what role sports, physical activity, movements, or kinetic movement could do to accelerate this movement towards 2030? And there's certainly a lot sport and physical activity could do. This slide comes from the publication in 2020, where we looked at the most logical connections between sports and movement and physical activity with the SDGs. We focus particularly on youth in developing nations and looking at sports for development in terms of active learning, active playing, active living. It's quite amazing how we can contribute positively to motoric skills, self-esteem, gender equality, better physical literacy and capabilities, employability, etc., etc. So behind every one of these small words, there's evidence, there's studies, but of course we always have to be careful and say if the intervention models are well planned and well designed. But if it's the case, it can certainly contribute to a number of SDGs. And these are the 6 most logical SDGs that are connected with sports for development in terms of individual and collective developments of communities, making communities stronger, empowering people, youth, and going towards more citizenship. We ran a survey through more than 40 NGOs active in sports for development, asking what were the most direct connections with the SDGs in the activities, and it came out that education, gender equality, and health and well-being were the top 3 that were mostly mentioned, and it pretty much matched what the yearly survey by the Sports and Dev platform also did. So the same 3 in a different order, but these are certainly the most logically connected in terms of the benefits of leveraging sports and physical activity for a better world. I'd like to quickly also remind everyone that this famous lady who came out with the definition of sustainability in the Brundtland report in '87, she also was the general director of the World Health Organization, and she insisted on investing in health and well-being, because this is at the basis of economic development, and a healthy ecosystem is very important, and not just in terms of healthcare, but also in terms of quality of life and well-being in general. So that's, I think, a very healthy reminder for all of us as we move forward. A quick reminder, and we're not going, of course, into details, but an interesting study that came out after COVID or during COVID was the realization that the fitter people were, the less at risk they were when COVID hit in terms of complications, hospitality, or death. If you look at the conclusions of this study, consistently meeting physical activity guidelines was strongly associated with the reduced risk for severe COVID-19 outcomes among infected adults. Look at these recommendations. We recommend efforts to promote physical activity be prioritized by public health agencies and incorporated into routine medical care. This is quite a strong statement and warning for governments and leaders in terms of trying to keep their populations healthy and active. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because it has a direct financial implications in terms of cost of healthcare, but cost in terms also of lack of productivity, etc., if we're not looking into this dimension, because of course some viruses will hit again, sadly. So if you want to make quick money, you should definitely invest into sedentary behaviors, the GAFAM or this type of furniture, but you may also decide to look deeper into innovative ways to fund people movement and physical activity, because there is a good news. The good news, of course, most of you know, is that regular physical activity has an amazing power to keep people healthy, both in terms of primary prevention, secondary prevention for physical health, mental health. It's quite amazing what it can do, especially also in an aging society, to keep people more independent for a longer time and cut down the costs of heavy dependence on society when physical health or mental health goes down. So looking at some of the evidence, because this is what is really challenging for all of us in the sports world community, is to come out with numbers and evidence, but there is more and more evidence coming out. This is the best buys from the World Health Organization. On the fourth item, you see that investing in the promotion of physical activity for everyone has a ratio of 1 to 3, pretty much in terms of return on investment. Sport England came out a few years ago with quite stunning numbers in terms of the benefits of physical in investing in community sports and physical activity. More recently, they came out with this number based on 22-23 surveys. So more than £100 billion worth in terms of social value of sports and physical activity. And it included also about 10% linked to cuts in health spendings, because people are just consuming less health services and medicine, for example. So why is it important to get people more active? Because it's the economy, stupid. The oldest among you will remember this is a famous quote of an advisor to the US president. And what I'm saying that is simply because we need numbers. We need evidence to really get more innovative funding and finance into the equation. And simply because the equation of prevention is still far from convincing political leaders. I mean, I see it particularly in my country, which is the country of pharma in Switzerland. It's amazing how it's challenging to convince people to invest more seriously into prevention, because we have only 2 to 3% of health spendings going into prevention. And it is stupid, because we know it works, in fact. So what did we come out with? And I would recommend for those who will be interested in diving deeper to go to this link I've put here on Inspired By website, which is the name of my first company. So we published this Sustainable Finance and Sports for Development white paper to sort of look at the latest models that have been tested in other areas, such as social impact bonds, and wonder why it has never been tested into sports for development and physical activity, because the evidence is there from many NGOs that have been audited, that getting young people and communities more physically active can have very powerful benefits, and which can be measured as well. So we made an attempt there to sort of propose and develop a sports for development outcome fund that would be funded not only by traditional funders and donors, but also by impact investors who would look at making funding available for a positive impact, and not necessarily investing to get the largest return on investment, financially speaking. And the way these instruments works, and we'll see later on the more simple models, but it's really making more impact investments and funding available for some of the best players in the market to operate at a larger scale. And then if the objectives are being met and audited, there's an outcome payer that will pay back the initial investors. And the outcome payer usually is the problem owner, who would be the host nations, the ministries, the city, or large international foundations. So we looked at this model, and interestingly, a few years later, we saw the first attempts and the first examples, and maybe people in the audience know of other examples, but here this is a call for contributions by the French Development Agency, published in late 23, where they ask for experts and companies to bid for a first sports for development sort of impact bond. So that there's good signs that things are moving in the market and there should be new tools coming out. And looking beyond just physical activity and sport, also, although this one touches on physical activity, this is an interesting example going on, a large test going on in Aarhus, the second city in Denmark, where they realized, as in many places, that the cases of diabetes type 2 because of poor nutrition and lack of physical activity are just growing fast, and it costs a lot of money. They also realized that there's a direct relationship between your socioeconomic level and the risk of getting diabetes type 2. And of course, the other reality is complications cost a lot of money. The more complications you have, the crazy the costs go. And what they decided to do is to really look at the best intervention models and invest more money into solid programs that would take people recently diagnosed with diabetes and focus on physical activity and healthy nutrition. And looking at their model, they really looked at cutting down the complication costs, and therefore overall over the years being able to say, okay, we invested 1 million in a program and the return is maybe 3, 4 or 5 millions down the line. So they're currently looking at these numbers and hopefully will come with reports and convincing reports for later on. So basically there's a problem owner on the left hand side, which is the city. In that case, there's an investor that is putting up the money first, and this is coming from a national foundation in the country. The service provider is delivering. It's being evaluated and audited. And then if the objectives are being met, the problem owner pays back the initial investor, and it can go in circle back again. Same type of approach exists in the private world, such as that foundation from the Swiss bank UBS, the Optimus Foundation. You have the same sort of approach. In this case, it's about education for girls in Pakistan, I think it was, or India. There's a service provider which is being funded by the investor, and then an independent evaluation being run. And in that case, it's the Children's Investment Fund Foundation that pays back the initial investor. So that's another example of these new mechanisms, which have also been tested by the ICRC with the first humanitarian impact bond. I met the guy who was leading the efforts a few years ago. I don't know how successful it's been, but it seems to be going on. In that case, it's also a case where you have initial payments under condition pledge to ICRC, which delivers through a new rehabilitation center its services. It's being verified, and then there's a payback system where there were different banks, insurances, and entities and foundations that paid back the initial payer. I will finish these couple of examples with another type of approach in terms of cross-funding efforts to leverage sports for a better world. This is a private project that I'm currently developing in Cameroon. The whole logics behind this project is to look at leveraging sports not only for well-being but also as a prevention tool for illegal immigration towards Europe. And our slogan is the title here, you know, building capacities and employability is a key instead of building high walls on the Southern European border. So the whole idea is to combine on one side an NGO active in sports for development, leveraging currently on basketball for girls and football for boys, and leveraging these training sessions to build up confidence, solidarity, but also bringing life skills and making sure they stick at schools and get a proper education. But on the other side, developing a social business in agroforestry of cocoa in that case, and ultimately trying to fund at least partly the sports for development and get it out of a complete dependence on philanthropy, being able to fund it through a social business where all the benefits ultimately will go to this sports for development initiative is what we're currently exploring. So we're really trying to empower local communities and local youth through the beauty of sports, training, competitions, and the values of what we know sports can be. and then developing their skills and employability through either agroforestry and also other types of work and employability development. I was given only 10 minutes, and I'm sure I'm way over, so I will finish with a couple of takeaways, modest takeaways for the day that may open a discussion later on. If I have to give a few recommendations in the field of innovative finance and new ways to fund and leverage physical activity and movement and sports, I would say, we always say it's hard to manage what you cannot measure. Maybe it's even harder to fund what you cannot measure. So we need to have numbers, evidence. We need to work with proper partners and bodies to get the evidence. Sometimes it can be with academic bodies. We need also joint effort between sports organizations, financial institutions, government agencies, ministries, foundations, academia. It's just basically what SDG 17 is saying, partnerships for the goals. This stuff is very complex, and we need to be very humble in the approach and get all the possible expertise from different areas. This point is important. Advocate, advocate, and advocate. I mean, there's never enough of this when it comes to convincing leaders, politically elected people, that sport is not just a business, it's not just leisure, nice to have. No, it can really bring social value. It can generate social capital, and it can also cut on public health costs, definitely. Don't shy away from innovations and risks. And I would recommend, if you want to explore a new field, go for a solid pilot, and don't hesitate to ask around you what's been tested successfully or not. And never underestimate the power of a few young local talents that may become great social entrepreneurs to carry your project beyond, and be really strong and solid in terms of documentation, and get your stuff to be able to scale up the projects. That's it in a nutshell, and I'm looking forward to others' reactions and questions and debating some of this stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philippe. I think you've painted a quite broad landscape, sharing a lot of insights of what is happening out there, what are the different models, but also sharing also insights of the importance of this work, which is always important to emphasize, of course. Just for all of the participants today, if you have at any point, anytime, anything you want to share or any questions for a speaker or panelist, please don't hesitate to use the chat, to use the Q&A section. And during the panel discussion, during the Q&A at the end of the session today, but also throughout the course of the webinar, we might pick them up, or speakers themselves might answer directly in the chat. Now we will have a short interactive break with Mentimeter, where we will be asking all of you, all the participants, to share some of their insights or some answers, some questions we have, which might guide the discussion for the panel discussion later. So you can all connect. You have the QR code there, or you can go to menti.com. You have the code for at the top of the screen to connect to the questionnaire. And yes, just waiting a little bit for people to have time to connect. And you should see soon the first questions appearing for everyone to provide their insights. So yeah. Let's see. So that's the first question is, yes, what type of funding model do you believe is the most effective for sport for all initiatives? Do you think it's more public funding? Are you leaning more towards private funding, crowdfunding, or community-based funding, or hybrid models that make a combination of 2 or 3 of the other ones, or maybe something different as well? So please just share your answers, just to have a general overview of what everyone's thoughts are on this matter. It seems to have a clear preference for hybrid models overall, meaning that we just make a mix or share of different sources of funding. Okay, I think we can move to the next question, but it's quite interesting. It's the hybrid models and then public funding, which is still quite strong right after private. Question number 2, have you used any of the global frameworks to guide your funding strategy? We're talking, for instance, on the Paris Agreement on Sport for Climate Change or other global frameworks. Are you aware of them? Have you used them? Okay, so we have a quite large majority, which is as either no or not sure. So only 15% of today's participants, yes. Might be interesting to explore what that might be the case, if it's a lack of awareness or knowledge about the opportunity that exists, or a lack of capacity for applying the frameworks and seeing how this can fit in with your organization and the work you're doing. But that's a quite interesting result. All right, then I think we can move now to the panel discussion. I am happy to keep with us Philippe after his impulse, but we are also joined with other high-level experts. I'm happy to welcome Juan-Pablo Salazar Salamanca, who's the Director of Inclusion for Latin American Development Bank. Happy to welcome as well Carey, Joost, the Head of Innovation for the Southern Africa Development Bank. Alexis, Saillard, who's been consultant for UNESCO, working closely with sports. Ollie, Dudfield, Associate Director for Olympism 365 at the International Olympic Committee. And I think that's it. So I will start with the first general question, maybe also reflecting a little bit on what Philippe just shared. What is, from your perspective, an important aspect of financing for impact that is often overlooked? What is, experience, something that is often overlooked, something that people sometimes miss, that is really important to your eyes and in your experience? If any one of you wants to start sharing some thoughts on that.
I can kick off there, and it follows well on Philip's intervention and always thought-provoking presentation. And it's the balance between replenishable and non-replenishable financing. And on one hand, if you are in the space of development financing, public development banks, the balance right between support for, as it would be framed, technical assistance and building the capacity, be they public, civil society, or private, to be able to develop sustainable models. On the flip side, at a community, at a civil society, at a place-based and a local level, really working towards that balance between what is grant-based, non-replenishable funding, even if it is from diversity of funding sources and investment sources, but an increasing need, and we can debate the value, the context of this, but an increasing need to also ensure that there's a level of accessing replenishable financing, and that is that it may be financing where you need to return a level of the financing back to the actors that are providing soft loans or providing within a social outcome contracting model. So I think that balance is often a key challenge. From one end, those who are used to being in the space of concessionary loans, soft loans, development financing, what's the balance for the replenishable and the technical cooperation, and then the flip side for community actors, civil society actors around that balance of what needs to be essentially replenishable and paid back, and what is actually on grants and technical assistance support.
Thank you. I think that's a very important thing indeed, and an aspect that is not always the first one that comes to mind, but something definitely to be considered, especially in the current landscape of fundraising and financing. Does anyone else of the panel want to share on that, maybe adding on to that or sharing a different insight or perspective?
If I may just react, oh, sorry, go ahead, Carey.
No, Philip, happy for you to go.
But very quickly, thank you very much, and hi, Ollie. You're asking a great questions on replenishable or non-replenishable finance, and I do believe, let's be honest, that in that field we'll always need replenishable funding from public bodies, because we generating well-being that is not sort of tangible, in a sense that most of the projects we're talking about are not generating goods or services that people are ready to pay for. So in a sense, we always need public bodies to be able to invest because there's a belief in prevention and that we're cutting down possible spendings down the line. But at the same time, on the other side, we can imagine private bodies that invest because they have investors who want to see their contributions work and generate positivity in the market. They don't want to lose it, but they don't want to have a 6% return, but at least to see their money work for positive impact. So there's always going to be, I think, a balance between these two in that field. And it's interesting that people spontaneously mention in majority a hybrid model when we ask about, the first Menti question. So it pretty much goes the same way.
Thanks. I was just going to tag onto that. The two, to answer your first question, is sustainability and collaboration were the two key pieces that come together, which supports the hybrid approach to the model. So what we've certainly seen is sport, whilst our dealer program is a platform, is the sport becomes the essence, the heart, from a community perspective, community participation into all of the other economic opportunities. So starting with the end in mind from a sustainability perspective allowed across our different precincts to see how we should structure the financing, whether it's grant funding, corporate partnerships, etc., but to create that as a platform. So starting with the end in mind around sustainability is we set ourselves targets. By when would we like this precinct self-sustaining financially? Obviously, there's a spectrum of sustainability, and then crowd in the different components, which speaks to the hybrid model. The collaboration for us goes together with that is because there are different organizations who want to play in those different realms. So we saw ourselves as a development finance institute as coming to the party to de-risk other investors across the sort of private sector as well as public funds. And there are some organizations who are happy to remain CSI based, so corporate social investment based, and they had specific outcomes. So those are two key things that we see even as we screen different organizations that come in, is there's a capacity and a capability around that, the sustainability mindset that is needed to foster. And then also what we've seen as a key piece is the mindset, because there's a different mindset around CSI proposals as well as an investment. And that has really been one of the biggest barriers for organizations in our kind of ecosystem, is to shift to that they are actually being invested in. They are an investment from a mindset perspective. Thanks.
That's a very interesting aspect because it's also about the culture, basically, if I understand correctly, like this mindset, the culture of we are having the same goal at the end of the day, but the way to approach it or the way to get the different stakeholders to play together in a way is not quite there. So maybe it's also something about cultural language where there is a lack. That's very interesting. Alexis and Juan-Pablo, if you have anything that you want to add on this topic.
On our side, we're just on an earlier stage trying to actually get the data that proves the causality. So until we're there, we can't really get a more sophisticated model as these guys are talking about. Yeah, first we need to connect the investing in the social return.
Maybe
Question
I'll
of
build
causality.
with.
Sorry.
Sorry, go for it, Philip.
No, the question of causality is very important and tricky, because in this sort of soft field, we would need to be able to have a control group for any type of intervention to be able to come up with this causality. So it's not an easy equation. And I just want to pick also the question from Laura Maria, and hi Laura Maria, question about how much organizations should invest in collecting asteroid data and getting the evidence versus actually delivering programs in the field. And this is a great question, because too many organizations feel they may lose power and activation on the ground because of this constant demand for more evidence or even causality, etc. So I think they should not be diverted from their core programs and delivering change. But something I see in the field is sometimes a lack of collaboration between organizations, and I think sometimes there's interesting partnerships between organizations to be able to pool their resources to go into MEL, monitoring, evaluation, learnings. So definitely looking at partnering with others would be something to consider.
Thank you, Philip. And to go back to the first question, one resource that UNESCO advocates is definitely impact investment and innovative financial models. So Philip, in his presentation, presented some of them. This is really, for UNESCO, an opportunity to enhance the accountability and the efficiency of sport for development programs and financing sport for development programs. With this in mind, in 2023, UNESCO published the Impact Investment in Sport report, and I will share the link to the report in the chat in a moment. But this report really makes the case for impact investment as a relevant for a global set of investors and financial markets. And this is really a resource, and the emphasis on innovation that UNESCO is pushing. In the report, one of the models that is presented, and that was also mentioned by Philip, so I won't go into too many details, but the social impact bond model is recognized as a resource that can be used. What I really want to emphasize there, because Philip also presented it already, is that it's really a win-win-win situation. So for the outcome payer, which is often a government or a foundation, it allows to have a less risk and to transfer the risk of the investment to the social investor, because the outcome payer will only pay if outcomes that are predefined and measured through key metrics are met. For the social investor, the risk is accounted in the interest rate, so it's something that is also accounted for and a winning situation for them. And then for the service provider, it doesn't change because the service provider will get paid through the loan of the social investor. So it's really a situation that brings potential high returns for all the actors involved. And as such, it is a model that UNESCO promotes. Maybe we'll be able to share later in the discussion some concrete examples. And just to put that on what Juan-Pablo just said, there are some barriers to using these models and impact investment in sports that are recognized. One of them is definitely the lack of robust evidence that connects sport with development outcomes, and there is therefore a need for further research on this field. And this is also a work that UNESCO is doing in collaboration with CAF, Juan-Pablo, and also the people present, Carey and Ollie, of course.
Thank you.
The issue of quality of evidence, of causality, is an important one to correlate or to consider in the context of the level of risk that the investor or funder is prepared to take on board, not just financial risk, but risk of achieving the outcomes and objectives of the intervention. And to put that, very concretely for those who are in the community and sport for all ecosystem, it may be around preventative health, it may be around some of the broader social policy outcomes that we often position sport for development, sport for all. And then the maturity of the intervention and associated frameworks that are very helpful are standards of evidence frameworks, quality of evidence framework. One comes to mind as the Nesta framework, innovation agency, who set out 5 levels of standards of evidence, and they correlate with both the size and capacity of the organization or the entity delivering the intervention, the maturity and length of time that the intervention has been delivered. And we often talk about balance, that balance, right? Actually, there is a space for innovation and risk. And there's also a space where we have, even if it's not random controlled trials, but a high standard of evidence that enables a more credible analysis of the social return on investment. And I think organizations, initiatives, projects can look towards more innovative that are risk-based, higher risk, the potential the outcome will not be achieved. And then, of course, ideally, we're moving across that continuum to building the evidence base. But there is that danger. I think this came through the questions and discussions that actually there can be not an overemphasis, because we definitely need to really prioritize monitoring, evaluation, understand the insight generated, but also ensure that there are times and in our articulation and advocacy that actually the ability to take on risk is important. Only 17% of the SDGs are on track with a more conventional approach to the type of interventions in public policy, the type of interventions in social and community development. So there is also an important impetus at the moment that actually we need new and innovative approaches to respond to a highly complex and constantly challenging environment. And the majority, if we're putting it in the space of public development banks, and I saw in the chat that there was a signposting to the Finance in Common Summit that the Development Bank of Southern Africa, along with the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, are hosting next week. Carey, I don't want to stress you too much, but next week in Cape Town, they'll come together. And yes, with the leadership of DOSB, with CAF, with UNESCO, with the Coalition of Development Banks for Sport for Sustainable Development, which the International Olympic Committee is also a member. There is a stream related to investment in sport and the returns that come from sport. But the other point I wanted to make is the majority of these public development banks, development financing institutions also have a level of investment and innovation and the ability to try new and innovative approaches. Carey, I know you had that up for DOSB, and the D-Lab itself is an innovation, and it's about putting sport in the middle of that innovation. So I think this is also an important lens when we look at response to the question, how much investment into the causality and the articulation of social return on investment, vis-a-vis also being able to look at interventions that have a higher level of risk, both financially, but also in terms of achieving the outcomes. And again, the balance between the two, quite important.
Thank you for this intervention. I think this completely echoes what Philip was mentioning about do not afraid to pilot, to innovate, to take risks, but it's also connecting a little bit with the mindset that Carey was mentioning, because I think that there might be sometimes a wrong culture around investing, where there is this idea that it has to necessarily have an impact. We need to achieve objectives, and especially, I guess, if you're a public body, it might be challenging to justify that you're doing spending and taking a risk that maybe in the end it doesn't achieve the goal because you are supposed to be held accountable for any investment. So do you, in your work, have you experienced this sort of resistance, and how do you circumvent that? How do you manage to try to break this maybe mental block from public funding, from investors, from to showcase the importance of, as you said, Ollie, at the moment, we are not going to achieve our goals if we don't change our approach. So, I mean, that's also a strong advocacy point that maybe it's time to do something differently. But how do you manage to do that effectively?
Well, the public development banks like CAF, like where I work, do have budgets to pilot things, to test things, to innovate. But it's hard to access those funds from the bottom up, because you need the champion. You need the guy within the organization that loves sports or has a previous reincarnation in another life where they worked on sports organizations, on sports development. Otherwise, I think it's very hard to penetrate. In my experience, before I had this job at CAF, and two lives ago, I was in public society. I was in civil society. I was in an NGO trying to access public banks, and it's very hard, even though the banks have a mandate to innovate, even though in the town hall meetings of the bank, the presidents always say, we need to innovate, we need to try different stuff. I think normal bureaucrats are very risk adverse. But sometimes you need to search for the champions within these big organizations to reach it. I don't see another way around it.
So you think it's through some identification of like champions or ambassadors, or that we could bridge the gap in a way between the investment financing and then the real community, the grassroots level, because that's also the issue of how can community-driven initiatives actually access any of the financing or the investment.
This is also where some of the frameworks that were flagged through the conversation. And I noted there was a very interesting response to the interactive Mentimeter around the utilization of global frameworks. And one of the frameworks that was mentioned was the Paris Agreement on Sport and Sustainable Development, which came out of the Paris Summit on Sport and Sustainable Development held on the eve of the Paris Games, hosted by President Macron and the International Olympic Committee President, President Bach. And that framework, which supported by, on one hand, 60 heads of government, but on the other hand, and probably as importantly, important leaders in the development financing world, sets out, on one hand, these are the areas of social outcomes, sustainable development goals, where we as policy and financing leaders see the value of investing in sport-based intervention and sport-based projects. But on the other hand, there was concrete commitments made. And for me, it was a really important milestone to go from recognition to intent and concrete commitment to action. The coalition of development banks for sport for sustainable development committed to invest 10 billion in inclusive, sustainable, sport-based infrastructure and projects before 2030. Different sport actors made infrastructure and investment, and there was the discussion of the launch of Global Sport Impact Fund, which was then acknowledged by the G7 development ministers in the Pescara Declaration on investment in, or sustainable investment in sport ecosystem. I only bring this up, not that to get into these very sometimes macro global frameworks, but they're a point of discussion to engage at a national, at a local level, in terms of there has been this commitment from other development financing actors into investing and seeing the value of investing in this sector. So the opportunity to build on Juan-Pablo's comments, to engage with that champion, ensure they understand these frameworks and the other type of institutions that have committed to these frameworks, gives them the confidence to then advocate internally. And sometimes it's actually from outside the tent that you can help those inside the tent to look at some of the developments globally, if it's within an area that is of particular interest and concern to you, and can help them drive forward their internal championing. And I saw real relevance there to the question on, have we used these global frameworks? Well, how can we use them? It can be to be an ally to some of those internal champions that Juan-Pablo has spoken about, and help them have the not just the evidence, but also the policy impetus to be able to take forward perhaps investment and innovations that we spoke about.
Maybe if I can also just add to what Ollie and Juan-Pablo have said, is we've actually seen, I certainly have, and Ollie, you can jump in, but a shift in preparing for the Financing Commons Summit. So just looking at the tracks that are typically part of the Financing Commons Summit, is having an entire track dedicated obviously to sport, arts and culture, but that elevation has changed the conversation. So we're seeing the dynamic where it's changed the view around sport for development, is that it's actually an enabler for some of the other conversations that are taking place. So if I give an example in our context in South Africa with the Just Transition, our program and platform is also part of the delivery around the Just Energy Transition, creating safe spaces in communities, is without sport at the heart of our platforms and spaces, is the resilience component for the youth and the women in the communities is not necessarily catered for. Then you add on all the other different components. So what we've really seen from our side is the advocacy that is coming from seeing sport for development as a critical part of the conversation overall, by including it in this manner in the Financing Commons Summit, to have a dedicated arena to it, has really changed the kinds of conversations and the kinds of partnerships as a knock-on from that. So I think there's different layers of advocacy, there's different layers of innovation that are required, and now it's up to, so I like the word of champions, because we kind of followed a similar approach from our perspective, is we required leadership to say, okay, let's ring fence moonshots. What do we want to achieve from these moonshots? And kind of have a safe to fail space for testing some of the models to create the innovative finance, and then come back into the spaces and say, okay, this worked, this really didn't work, this is what we propose. So I think it's exciting to see there's clear distinctions with the levels, because what we need then is players who provide the bridge between the financing institutions and the NPOs, the organizations who are actually doing the work. And I suppose my parting shot on that is, one of our biggest learnings has been, it's almost two different worlds that collide, because ours is a very highly governance-driven world with lots of metrics, etc., that's required, but development is at our heart. So finding where we meet the NPOs on the ground who have that at their heart, and then finding how we move forward together, that's really been one of our biggest learnings and innovations in our space.
There's a lot to unpack in there, I think, a lot of different information. But what I like as well, especially with the mention of the Paris Agreement and the focus, and then how this also brought a lot of different actors together, this sort of ties in as well to another question that was asked about managing to get, in a way, a single message, or let's say a common narrative that we can have a unified message around. From different actors, different stakeholders in the field, not only sport organization or sport for development or sport for all or development banks, but also outside of the sector. How do you think, do you think that the Paris Agreement can, for instance, set an example for that? Or how do you think we could maybe manage to create this narrative, this mindset, this culture, where we could bring all the players together and have maybe a stronger political power as well?
I think maybe to go back on what was said before, research is really a key aspect to get this narrative and this maintain this momentum of investing in sport. This is also taken from the Paris Agreement and the commitment number 9 that combines research with investment. And this is a work that is being led as part of the Finance in Common Coalition, the coalition of sustainable development through sports. This is a work that is being led by UNESCO with CAF as the co-leaders of Task Force 3 of the coalition on research, but also, of course, with the inputs of coalition members like DBSA and the IOC. Promoting research and harmonizing the global efforts that are made for research through initiatives like a research agenda, which is a research pipeline of research projects that can be made to establish this causality between sport and development outcomes, is something that UNESCO and CAF are doing as part of this coalition. A research agenda, to make it a bit more concrete, what can it be? It's an identification of research priorities, the establishment of a roster of experts as well that are available for public development banks and other actors that want to investigate this connection on sports with development. Also making sure that all the research that is being conducted is to the best of our capacities open source as well, because this is an important point to make sure that the knowledge created is available to all. And this research can, of course, it's about advocacy. It's also about capacity building, ensuring that there is alignment between countries on how to engage in sports development projects, and of course, pilot projects like Juan-Pablo mentioned are also important for this, to make sure that there is a proof of concept and concrete examples of how you can connect concrete metrics with measurable outcomes to development goals and sport-based initiatives.
Yeah, come in and say the research question. We spoke about the advocacy question. Also very concrete, if you're a community organization, civil society, NGO, being able to advocate that common message that comes potentially from global frameworks. It might be with local government. It might be with local philanthropic investors. And then the other area that I add to that in response to your question, and again, highly relevant whether you're talking at global level, continental, national, or local level, is collective action. I mean, let's take one sector, and we may know the health sector well, but that's a sector that has a whole range of different constituent parts, likewise education, likewise economic development. A lot of people view sport the same. Yes, there's a whole range of constituent parts in the sport movement, in the sport ecosystem, but it's very difficult for those outside the sporting ecosystem to be able to break down who are all these actors, what's that. So the ability, whether it's a local level, subnational, national, continental, global, to be able to work collectively is absolutely critical. And form coalitions, form consortia, does two things. It dissipates risk because it's spread across multiple organizations, whether you're delivery, implementer, whether you're investor, whether you're outcome payer, if we're using that model. It also enables additional reach and scale. Alexis spoke before about some work that the IOC, CAF, and UNESCO are doing, testing social outcome contracting models in Latin America. Now, I'll park that example. I'll give you another example where, as part of the approach for the International Olympic Committee to contribute to strengthening the role of sport to the SDGs, you see other stakeholders, other actors who have a similar output. The French Development Agency, Laureus Sport for Good, Fundación SES, who's one of the leading social policy NGOs in Latin America, a whole range of other organizations. And together we've formed a collective, a consortia that's specifically working on resourcing and delivering sport-based employability programs. Across Africa and Latin America, this was launched in 2023, and the reach now is already up to 33 countries. The number of youth beneficiaries are into the tens of thousands, about 60,000 access to employability skills and training through sport. But the other lesson that we've had is a consortia-based approach actually helps de-risk. So investors who have joined us in this consortia, civil society organizations have joined us in this consortia, public authorities have joined because there's strength in numbers. Now, often when we're at a community level, working in an NGO space, and I've been before in a coalition of NGOs and civil society organizations, it is challenging to maintain and continue to sustain the resources that are required to deliver, particularly with this focus on project-based investment rather than capacity and organizational-based investment. And that's very clear. But the opportunity to work more in collectives and consortia is a way to get a singular message, but also ask the hard questions of those that you're partnering with. Why is there 4 and 5 of you essentially funding the same project and not cooperating and coordinating? Now, of course, there's barriers and challenges to that, but there needs to be this balance, and I don't like using the term, but I saw it in the chat, between top-down, bottom-up pressure to say, hey, if you want to partner with us, you work in collectives so that we have more capacity to deliver the impact and get this singular message. Vice versa, those who are actually in the investment and financing, bucket funds, collectives, consortias, dissipate risk, reduce the triplicate reporting requirements on those who've been invested in, and extend efficiencies and reach and scale. So collective action for me is absolutely a critical point of the response to your question, actually joining up. And this is relevant at a community-based organization as it is to the global actors working together on the coalition of sport for sustainable development, driving the work at the Fix Arena in Cape Town next week.
I would add that, without that collective action, Ollie, without a coalition of sustainable development with through sports, in which there are other development banks, there is no way that an organization like ours, the Latin American Development Bank, would invest in sports, because all of the good reasons that you have just shown, Ollie. I would say that there's a big weakness, though, comparatively to other consortiums in other themes, because agendas in governments and agendas in the development world compete. So why are we funding sports as opposed to, I don't know, climate change, or more intuitive things like actual more infrastructure, as it is known in development? So it's a big weakness because it's not as intuitive as the other agendas. But then there's a big strength in that sports is something everybody loves, So that's a big strength that our consortium has, as opposed to infrastructure. There is no Olympic Games of highway. You know, there is no like big shows, big billion televisions turned on for other themes. So even if investing in sports as a tool of development isn't as intuitive as other agendas, there is an attractiveness given the fact that that sports is a language that everyone can understand.
If I may just jump 1 second on that, because I love what you say here. We talked a lot about research, metrics, data, evidence, causality, but at the end of the day, the business we're in is about emotion. Sports, physical activity is about getting people together. It's about generating social capital, and it's very intangible, but it can be a great accelerator for more tangible things such as employability, such as peace, such as, you know, so it's an in-between nugget that is critical to accelerate change. And we should be good at AI, and don't take me wrongly, not artificial intelligence, but affective interactions. When we talk about sports physical activity, we have to talk about behavioral change. And this is a very challenging science. And this is why we have, you know, we live in an era of communications and marketing. We have to be good at telling stories. We have to be good at building these narratives and leveraging on role models and champions. This is quite unique, what we have here. And this is a universal language. So this is an area that goes beyond metrics, evidence, etc. It's about telling stories of individuals who get their lives changed and the lives of their communities. And I think there's way more work we can do there to be impactful.
Thank you so much to all of you. I feel like I'm doing something wrong by putting an end to this conversation because it's so interesting and there's so many insights here, but we have to move on. But thank you so much for sharing all the insights. Please feel free as well to pick up the questions you see in the chat or in the Q&A and answer them there. And of course, we'll make everything available for the participants after the webinar is over. Now we will have another short interactive break. We are going back to Mentimeter with a few questions that can also be connected a little bit to the conversation we just had. So I think the Mentimeter will appear soon. There it is. And the first question is, this is the second question already, isn't it? Well, the first question should be, what would you like to learn more about when it comes to financing inclusive and community-driven sports programs? So this is an open-ended answer. Please type in what's for you the most relevant, the most important, or what you feel that you are lacking for your work, for your organization, or for generating impact in your communities. Maybe we can share the link to the Mentimeter again in the chat. Right, and so sustainability approaches and models, how to build coalitions, indeed, interconnection between global and local agenda. That's about bridging this gap we're talking about between the global frameworks, the global level, and then the community grassroots level. Capacity building for preparation of proposals, requests for funding, very important, of course. More information about innovative funding models and how to convince local authorities, but also professional stakeholder engagement. So it's also about like connecting with the relevant partners and stakeholders. Well, thank you for your answers to this question. I think we can move to the next question now. What role do you think local communities should play in financing and sustaining sports initiatives in your area? It's interesting that collaboration with local businesses is in the lead right now. Interesting results, because surprisingly advocacy not very high, which goes a little bit against the conclusion we just had from Philippe on how we need to be better at building narrative, at sharing stories, at having champions, role models, etc. And here actually it appears to be the least important. That's interesting. Well, thank you all for your time in sharing your thoughts through the Mentimeter. And now for the final part of the webinar, it is my pleasure to welcome Khalida Popal, the founder and CEO of Girl Power Organization, who will share her experience and the work of Girl Power Organization in the field. Khalida, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. Are you able to see the presentation?
We can see the presentation. It's not full screen yet.
How about now?
Yeah, perfect.
All good? Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here. Have a good morning, good evening, wherever the folks are. It's such an honor and pleasure to be here. I'm founder and director of Girl Power Organization, and to start with my own purpose and story why Girl Power was founded. I have an experience of playing football professionally, but also grassroots. I've been involved in football for development and also structured football for several years. Sport has helped me to find my voice and my purpose, and helped me to understand how to give back to the community. And I'm always grateful for the network and the support I have received from football and the person who become through sport. And my experience living in refugee centers in Europe helped me to understand the challenges our community were facing. So as a result, I started coaching women and girls in the refugee centers while I was also a refugee. And when I got permission to stay in Denmark, I started Girl Power Organization. So the main objective of Girl Power is using football for development or sport for development and transformative education as a tools for empowerment and inclusion of women and girls. Our main focus is marginalized communities. The organization started in 2014 as more networking initiative, and 2016 it was officially registered in Denmark, and we started organizing sports across Denmark and also in marginalized communities, with the main focus on how to build bridges between two divided communities. In our case, marginalized community and the citizens of the country, to change the narratives, to campaign for equal inclusion, but also equal access to sport. The organization later on expanded and become an international organization where we have been delivering programs in different countries around the world. And since the establishment, we have impacted over 50,000 people. Why it matters for us? Because we want to create access to sport. We want to create safe spaces where women and girls flourish and create a space where they can share the challenges that they are facing, create sisterhood, community, where they together we can find solutions, how to participate in finding solutions especially for the needs that our community is facing, and how sport can be used to challenge some of the problems, which is very much on gender-based violence, and exclusion in sport, and discrimination in sport. We want to also, through our programs, we want to create access to leadership opportunities. In our case, unfortunately, especially in our case, in marginalized communities, that's our focus group, and refugee community, the narratives, the way it's written, it's told that we are people who are receivers, not the contributors. And so through our programs, we want to change that narrative that we have great resources and talent, we can contribute, we can lead, and we can change the narrative. So how we do it, we have regular sports training and also football training, football for development, where we create safe spaces and environment where women and girls can join our training, can share the space, but also can find the pathway in football or sport if they want to. So we go to the community, we find a community, we provide the access to sport to the community. Whereas sometimes for our community and our target group, it's very difficult and challenges for them to participate in sport when it's far away from them. Sport is far away and it's not easy to access those activities. Once they understand the impact and the joy in sport, then we connect them with clubs, with other organizations to continue their career in sport and structure, football or other sports. We also, through our work, we want to take community action. We want to use, again, sport and education as powerful tools to educate our community about their rights, about the challenges that exist and the barriers that that our community is facing, and how to advocate for that, so they can own their narratives, they can take a lead, and they can stand together and advocate for inclusion, for diversity, but also equal access to sport. And it happens through programs that we are offering to the communities, courses and workshops, mentorship programs. Other part of our program is leadership. As mentioned before, owning the narrative, owning our stories, owning our voices, it matters, because unfortunately, some wrong medias has written very bad about refugees, stateless people, marginalized community, that they're not contributing positively. And that I have experienced this myself, being as a refugee. What we are trying to do is to create educational and sport opportunity for young leaders, for young women from the community who wants to give back to the community, who wants to inspire young people in the community, boys and girls, who can change the narrative, but also challenge the narrative, but also become role models for their community. And that's what they get educated, connected with the resources, with mentors, support, where they can be ready to go back to their community and start coaching, start participating in in conversations, in panel discussions, and talk about the topics that that matters for them. And the younger people in the community can see and identify them as their role models, as their community leaders. So what we are trying to do through our leadership programs, we want to create a more representation. We want to emphasize why representation matters and why we need to contribute positively in the society. In all our programs are around our framework, which is creating opportunities for leadership for our community, to give back to the community where we come from. And football and sport is our main tool. We have been using this in different programs that we have offered in different places, like refugee centers, marginalized communities, and where people, their feedback has been very positive. It has helped our community to build connections, build network, created job opportunities, education opportunities, but also it has also helped them to overcome stressful and mental health issues that they were facing based on their experiences in the past as refugees and as people in the community that they have faced traumas. So sport has always been used in our programs as a way for healing and overcoming the trauma. We have worked with different organizations. The way we work and to keep our work more sustainable and more powerful. We are non-profit. It's very difficult to continuously be dependent on fundraising and finances. But one of the models that has been very helpful in our case is collaboration with local organizations, collaboration with especially football clubs that they have resources, collaboration with the players who have platforms and resources. All our programs is around collaboration. We don't just lead our programs ourselves, but it's with many stakeholders involved that can cover some of the costs, and we still manage to deliver our programs. So it's a lot around exchange and storytelling. For example, in some of these photos, you can see that there is, for example, in this photo, there is a group of refugees, newcomers, and then we organize friendly games, friendly programs for them where they can tell their stories, and we invite or participate in football clubs, and we go to football clubs where the athletes meet these young refugees or newcomers, hear their stories, but also create this exchange and friendship, but also internship and job opportunities, but also football pathways for some of them who have the talent to continue their career. In advocacy programs, we have been partnering with advocates, human rights advocates, with people who have a greater platform to help us to talk about several topics about, for example, inclusion in sport, about empowering refugees, and also just some of the challenges that has happened recently in Europe and the UK. The hate towards refugees and voters against refugees. It has been very helpful with our collaboration with organizations to challenge and advocate, but also tell and share the positive stories. Media has been a great tool to use to tell the stories, the positive stories that comes from the community, and tells the positive stories of contribution, how in a short time, when the opportunities were given, there has been positive impact in the community, and how our target group or young leaders with the marginalized and refugee backgrounds have participated positively when the right opportunities were given. Through our collaborations with government, with football clubs, organizations, we have managed to expand our programs beyond Europe and different countries, and we have reached to so many young leaders who now are, some of them are coaches, some of them are advocating and participating in conferences and panel discussions. And they are also challenging some governments when it comes to the refugee or immigration policies. That was a bit about our organization, how we contribute through sport and education. Football has empowered me and has helped me to find my voice and find a movement for women and girls back then where I come from, Afghanistan. And as a refugee, helped me to change the narrative about me and the other refugees in my community. And today, through my organization, Girl Power, I'm contributing positively to the society through my positive examples. And Girl Power is a way of giving back for me to the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Khalida, for this presentation. Congratulations on the fantastic impact that you're having with your organization as well. That's very important and very great to see the results and the development of that. I think we just have time for maybe one quick question. When we see your presentation and you share the work you're doing at the grassroots level, like we literally see photos and images of the actual impact that you have on the community. But coming a bit back to the questions we had earlier, how do you connect, or how do you feel that your organization fits within this scope of the global frameworks? Do you have any connection with the global frameworks? How do you see the connection, and how do you bridge this gap?
So what we are trying to do is that we are participating and contributing from our side with the limited resources what we have. And it has been very impactful, especially when it comes to global sustainable development goals. In one of our focuses that creating opportunities for women to get access to education, get access to leadership, and get access to sport. And through that, they also gain access to further resources. And it also helps the community to be active and when it comes to mental health and well-being. And that is actually saving the resources from a country and a community where they don't have active and healthy citizens. So what we are trying to do in each country, in each location, we are working together with different organizations. We are also creating opportunities for healthy lifestyle, trying to also support people and motivate people to contribute positively in the society.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining us today. I apologize for all we had other great questions that we have received for the panelists or for Khalida, but unfortunately we will not have time for them. But we will make the recording of the webinar available to everyone on our website, on our YouTube channel, as usual, where you can also find the recordings of the previous webinars. And before we leave, I also would like to already invite you to save the date for our next webinar. I believe it will be on the 23rd of April, or in April, maybe the date is not confirmed yet, and it will be about harnessing the power of sport, driving social change and peace building through sport for all. So we will communicate more details as they come. Watch this space, check on our website, on newsletter. And thank you so much once again to all the speakers and panelists of today for your fantastic insights.